Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's been a lot of talk of the standing the United States currently finds itself in terms of NATO. And we have the dynamic really picking up with the negotiations happening between the United States and Russia. Apparently, Ukraine potentially not involved in these, but it seems like the European NATO countries are not happy with the way the United States is treating these negotiations. These negotiations held in Saudi Arabia, I believe. Then we'll see what ends up happening. But Zelensky is right now bluffing, I think, and saying we're not going to take it seriously. If we're not involved in the negotiation process, the war is going to continue. They really don't have a choice based off of the dynamic of how much the United States contributes to Ukraine in terms of this war effort. They need the United States. If they don't have the United States, it's going to be very, very hard, even with the other European countries, based off of the situation with NATO. And now you're seeing many liberals within NATO, within those European countries, saying that they can't rely on the United States. That's exactly what Donald Trump wants. They're doing this weird self-own thing to where they're like, oh, Trump is really going to alienate him again, the United States against us. That's his fault. No, no, no. That's what Trump wants. We don't want to be involved in these conflicts in Eastern Europe. That's a European problem. Obviously, the people of Germany, and we'll get to Germany here in a second, but obviously the people of Germany, Italy, the UK, they've got a bigger vested interest based off of geography, where the war is located. It really does matter. And that's something I never see anyone bring up. It's a lot more important to those people because of how close Russia is to them, whereas Trump just wants to be cordial and get the war over with. And I said, and by the way, it's looking like we'll see what happens. I mean, it's all speculation, but from what I heard, the peace deal looks very solid. At least the rumors in terms of it doesn't look like Russia is going to be getting a ton of land. There might be a referendum in two Eastern European territories right now that are controlled by Russia. There's potentially going to be a referendum. They might vote to join Russia, and then there's going to be a demilitarized zone. And yes, obviously, Crimea is going to stay with Russia. I mean, what? It's like people are like, well, Crimea should be returned. How is that possible? What is the dynamic of Crimea being returned? Russia has landed. The only way Crimea would get returned is if Ukraine had significant land into Russia and then say, okay, we'll retreat, but give us Crimea. I don't understand how that works. It's just like, it doesn't make. What negotiation style are you doing? They have no. There's no way they can get Crimea. They have no land, or they may have like a little sliver of land, Russian land that is. But it raises the question when you've got stuff like this, where I mean, you see what happened on 60 Minutes. I think this was yesterday. These German prosecutors basically admit that yes, you go to jail for posts and also retweeting posts, and that it's potentially worse than saying it to people's faces because it stays online. For eternity, they say, because oh, you post something online, it stays up. I mean, you can delete it, but that's the argument now. It's like, well, if you say something face to face, it's over after that. But if it's online, so Germany right now is admitting they have zero free speech. And it's like, we're in NATO. Why are we protecting Germany's interests when that completely goes against the United States and our belief system? And these German prosecutors are like, yes, for reposting something. And that's what I'm saying. People thought it was a joke. No, you go to jail for emojis. Yes, that happened in the UK. And it's like, that's the whole thing where it's like, maybe the United States should look to get out of NATO. So many top experts have said, they say, look, the United States at this point is in a different position than we were in 1949, 1950, when the Soviet Union was so massive and it was very powerful, and they had those Eastern European countries. Thank goodness they were communist, so their government really enabled the growth of their country. But still, they were very powerful in the United States. Like, yeah, it's probably smart to make this pact with the European countries after World War II, and that's what we did. But now it's a different dynamic. It's a completely different ballgame. The idea that we would still abide by a pact that was made so long ago, or a military agreement that was made so long ago, it doesn't make any sense. And so that's why I think Donald Trump is reevaluating NATO. Now, there's been a lot of rumors. Well, is Trump going to leave NATO? There's been no official word on what Trump wants to do with NATO, but we can read the tea leaves and we understand that Trump is probably not very happy with the current situation within NATO. And there is a lot of avenues Trump could take if he did want to leave NATO. The most obvious being you've got this situation in Germany. We know what's going on in the UK. And what they'll do now is they'll use, just like whenever someone says something that the government doesn't like, they say it's a conspiracy theory. That's what they do in these European countries. Anytime a right-wing group rises, they just label them, Nazis. They say they're far right. It's like a lesbian is the leader of this group in Germany. They say it's far right. You've got to be kidding me. But that's a demoralization tactic to control the narrative and to control the general populace. And that's why you've got Germans marching against the right-wing group in Germany. It's like you're marching for your own enslavement. If you can't tweet out stuff or repost a tweet without potentially going to jail, you are not free. And the idea that we would defend Germany and a government that right now views living life there that way, that's something that needs to potentially be reevaluated. And that's a very easy thing for Trump to do. Or Trump can just use it as leverage. With these European countries, we're basically at the point to where you need to give us Greenland or we're just going to leave NATO. Because it's just like we've had so much patience with these countries, but they continue to move further and further left. I mean, it's just annoying. So it's like at a certain point, we're just going to give you ultimatums. We don't care anymore. And you know what? If you want to say, oh, we don't need the United States, that's fine. That's fine. And obviously that dynamic doesn't really make sense considering the United States contributes 70% of the military budget when you look at NATO, and we're number one in the joint budget as well because they've got two different budgets. Every country has their own military budget. It gets divvied up. And then there's also just a joint overall budget, which the United States contributes number one in that as well. That's a lot less, obviously, than the combined total military budget of all the countries, but you still do have that. So look, when it comes to this, you do have these articles going around. Let's see if I can find it. Some of these articles talking about the United States, not very popular with the European countries right now. The European countries looking for a new leader within NATO, really. Zelensky not happy. The risk that Russia will occupy Europe is 100% if US pulls out of NATO. So obviously completely false. Zelensky knows it's false. This is the fear-mongering that has to come out from these people because they want the United States to stay in NATO. And it's just, I mean, Russia cannot, they wouldn't even go for a full occupation. It would be a nuclear war. They don't have the army to fully occupy Europe. And he knows that. They all know that, but again, it's the fear-mongering tactic when it comes to that. But it's interesting as well because I was reading something about Trump possibly trying to make some type of pact with Russia and China to tone down their military budgets. Now, this seems like there's no chance it would ever happen, considering the United States has the number one military budget by far. Why would other U.S. adversaries, even if the U.S. tones down their budget, why would they follow? But to me, that just goes to show you the idea that Trump is this huge fascist. One of the core tenets of being a fascist is an extremely strong military, and also growing your military even bigger, which the United States very easily could do under Trump. We did it under his first term, but now it seems like Trump's a little bit different approach when it comes to this and potentially saving money and making the quality of life in the United States better. This is a more liberal type policy, honestly, but liberals are going to go against it, what Trump is saying about maybe lowering the military budget, but we're not going to be taken advantage of. We want other countries to lower their military budgets as well if we're going to do it and go through a de-escalation period in the world as Trump looks to end the Middle Eastern war with Israel and Palestine, and also this Russia-Ukraine situation. But from what I saw, the peace deal with Russia, Ukraine, it looks very solid from what I saw. It doesn't look like Ukraine's going to be giving up a ton of land. It might even be a diplomatic process where there's a vote and a referendum on those territories. They probably will go to Russia because they're Russian-speaking areas. A lot of those people identify as Russian. It doesn't look too bad, honestly, from what I've seen. It looks even better than what I thought. But this is early on. We'll see what happens in terms of the negotiations. It is kind of odd that Zelensky would not be involved, or a representative from Ukraine would not be involved in the negotiations. I'm not going to lie. You would think they would at least have one there for media purposes. Like, look at this, we're including everyone. It just makes it look better. But we'll see what the deal ends up, and it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. The thing is, people are like, well, doesn't Zelensky have to be there? Doesn't a Ukraine representative have to be there? It's just based off of the dynamic of Zelensky requiring NATO support to continue to have a chance in this war. If NATO support gets shut off, Zelensky would be forced to accept a peace deal. So that's why it's like NATO is directly negotiating with the Russians rather than Zelensky, because Zelensky and Ukraine are reliant on NATO for support to continue to fight in this war. And so that's basically the dynamic when it comes to that. But I mean, this would be the impossible if Trump's able to pull this off. The idea of getting the United States into a spot where we are able to lower our military budget. I mean, listen, we want to have the biggest military. It's important. We want global dominance to a degree. But I think a lot more Republicans now, there's a lot less, especially when it comes to foreign affairs, a lot less hawkishness, if you will, and a lot more of let's improve our own quality of life. And I think Trump is potentially trying to do that. But it's a situation to where it's like, and look, it's always a give and take thing with these other countries. Obviously, I can understand their perspective. The United States has a much bigger military budget. They're not happy about that. Why would they lower their military budget? Even if we were to lower ours significantly, we would still probably be number one in terms of that. So it's one of those things to where it's like, well, do you lower it? Is that smart? Ideally, you would think we would be able to lower it a little bit. But where does that money go to? Right? Does that go to a quality of life improvement? Does that go to saving in terms of enabling citizens to not have to pay an income tax? Does that lower taxes overall? And also Trump, he's the businessman. That's just the thing with Ukraine. It's like Trump comes in and it's immediately, well, we can fund you for this war, but you need to give us natural resources, which is it's a businessman. If we give you something, you need to give us something. Same thing with Taiwan. If we give you something, we need to get something in return. We're not going to be taken advantage of. Yes, I understand by proxy, us funding Ukraine to weaken Russia can be good because Russia's an adversary. But still, I understand what Trump is saying to where we need to get something in return, especially considering when you look at NATO in general. Like some of these headlines, like NATO scrambles to find a new leader. Like, I don't even know what to do with the headline. The United States is 70% of NATO. It's like, yeah, find a new leader from one of the smaller countries that contributes basically nothing. You need the United States. NATO needs the United States. If they don't have the United States, it's a completely different agreement. It's basically a European, a European Union 2.0 with a few other countries. So we will see what happens in terms of this. But look, when you've got Trump could very easily say, you've got German prosecutors saying that people can go to jail for tweets and admitting and saying, well, yeah, they're going to go to prison, and you repost, you're going to prison, you're amplifying the message, and it's even worse than saying it in person because it stays up. This is not something that the United States endorses. Why are we fighting in tandem with these people? We don't agree with this at all. And also, I mean, we'll see what happens, but obviously, I mean, it is, you look at what's going on with Europe with the invasion of all the illegals, and it would be impossible for right-wing parties, probably far right-wing parties, not to rise. But I mean, actually, no, I don't think, in this media climate, I don't think it's possible because they would just demonize the right-wing parties. But there will be right-wing parties. They have to rise. I mean, look at what's going on with the liberalism. Liberalism is destroying cities in the UK with the migrant influx, to where the migrants now, I was reading, make up more than the natural born population in some of these cities in the UK, and they're just ransacked. And of course they are. Like who is allowing that? And how is there not an immediate, like, from the natural born citizens to say, no, this is not going to happen? Like, every one of those people needs to stand up. It's like, this is how you get right-wing leadership, pretty far right-wing leadership, as to reject this, because this is absurd. They're destroying their countries for what? But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.